Okay. Okay. Hello, Dale. Thank you for agreeing to interview with me. I want to make sure that I get your permission on recording this interview. This interview will be about 20 minutes long, and I will be sharing this information in a paper from my communication interview practice course at CSUSM. At any time, if you feel uncomfortable, you're more than welcome to ask me to stop the recording. Do you agree to be recorded?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So I've asked you to interview me for a few reasons. First, I've known you for close to a year now, and I've never heard fully about your childhood. Actually, the other night when we were at dinner was the first time I heard more about it, which was pretty cool. Um, and one of the pieces that you shared is that everyone has their hardships. That's some advice that I've always taken to heart, but have been curious to know what you have overcome to get you to the point. Secondly, I admire your tenacity and drive for entrepreneurship, and would love to ask you questions related to that. And finally, in our interview, you and me have been working on public speaking together, and I want to delve deeper into ways that you may see me improving my public speaking skills. Um, Whatever information you feel I could benefit from, I'd be happy to receive. With that being said, let's jump right on in.
Thank you.
Um, so I want to start off by asking what day and year you were born.
April 24th, 1948.
Okay, your birthday's coming up. That's cool. Um, so I know you grew up in Chicago and love to hear about your childhood firsthand. So what was it like growing up in Chicago, Dale?
Well, I grew up about 110 miles southwest of Chicago in a
Okay.
small town called Depew, Illinois. Had a population of approximately 1,600 residents.
Okay.
And growing up in a small community, um, you have sense of community. Everybody knows everybody, and everybody knows who everybody is in town. And so there's but even with a small community, there's still different levels of success, money, wealth, poverty, and the town I grew up in had all those layers.
Okay. Interesting. So I've heard briefly from you that you were someone who got into trouble as a kid. Um, why would you say that you were got in trouble?
Well, it was trouble by their definition, not by my definition.
Okay.
I grew up in a family of six, of which I'm the middle child.
Okay.
So I was always a negotiator. And I also ended up as the problem solver. Um, I had a mindset that I was not a follower. Things had to make sense to me before I followed them. So I questioned a lot of things from a very, very early age. And I kept true to my own beliefs. And there are certain things as you grow up, you become aware of, and then you learn from those experiences, and it sort of makes who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So I never I never followed it. I would go down a route once I, in my own mind, understood it.
Okay.
So I had my own mind.
How do you feel that being the middle child allowed you to kind of be that problem solver as well as negotiator? How do you feel that kind of worked out?
Well, when you look at any family and the dynamics of a family, you find that the middle child usually is the go-to person. They're more diplomatic because they're dealing with the younger and they're dealing with the older kids in the house, and they know how to have to survive in that environment. You know,
Mm.
the older child gets things before anybody else, and as a middle child, I kept saying, "Well, why would he get it? All right, why I'm not having it?"
Mm.
And so, you're constantly negotiating between the young kids in the family and the older kids in the family and your parents, and
Gotcha.
and that's why the middle child, historically, when you look at personalities and so forth, middle child has certain attributes that they're usually pretty good negotiators.
Yeah, I could see that. That makes a lot of sense. Um, I wanted to ask what life lesson you learned as a kid that have always stuck with you.
Yeah, never work for anybody. Own your own business.
Okay.
And I had that as a mantra for a long, long time. I looked at the business owners of small businesses and larger businesses in my community, and at a very early age, I said, you know what, they have just as much pressure as the guy who's pumping gas for minimum wage. Why not go make some money with the pressure? Same
Mhm.
pressure. All right. You know, from an individual standpoint. And my life lesson was changed. It was not that I would not work for somebody. I would not work for somebody who was inept,
Mhm.
uh, somebody that did not create an environment that I was looking for. So what I was really saying is that I would work for somebody if I had a particular environment. And that has driven most of the businesses that I have been successful with, is that I create the culture within those companies of a company that I would work in. And
Mm.
you know,
I see.
when you look at Tag, and you know me on the outside, when you look at Tag, can you see my culture and my mentality throughout that company?
Absolutely. That is
Yeah.
probably one of the first things that is seen there.
So that is my life lesson, is my life lesson as a young, you know, young person growing up, is that, you know, wanted to be entrepreneurial, wanted to work for myself, but realized why I wanted to work for myself was I wanted to work in an environment that was conducive to success as an individual. And most companies have no idea what that means, how you treat employees, how you reward employees, how you work with employees. And, you know, I cringe when I listen to an owner says, well, my employees, well, they're not your employees. You know,
Mhm.
you're fortunate enough to work with them.
Yeah.
And you can't own somebody. You can't control somebody. All you can do is work with somebody, and all you can do is create an environment that allows them to have success.
Yeah.
That's the life lesson I've learned in my life.
Okay. Yeah. And luckily, owning somebody got outlawed years ago. So,
Yeah, but there's still a lot of business owners that refer to their employees as my employees, and
yeah,
I
absolutely.
cringe when I hear that shit.
Okay. Um, what you one of the as I briefly mentioned earlier, you have helped me realize that nobody goes through life unscathed.
Yep.
And if you don't mind sharing, what's a hardship that you've endured since your childhood?
Well, we all have different degrees, all right? I think the one thing that I endured was, I was somewhat misunderstood, and I was a little different than most. So you pay the price for that.
Hmm.
Because it seems like when growing up, I kept visualizing that society, the people around me were trying to break me, and I
Hmm.
refused to be broken. That number one. So I grew up with that. Um, the other thing is that at the age of 42 or 43, I I completely lost everything that I owned. I went into bankruptcy. I lost houses. I lost cars. I lost businesses. And that happened in about 1991. And
Wow.
I was very successful, multimillionaire, and lost everything. Two things that I realized is that I didn't consider myself a failure. I consider what I did failed. All right.
Hmm.
That's number one. And number two, uh, it took me 7 years to come back stronger than what I was when I went into bankruptcy 7 years prior. So I tripled my net worth in those 7 years of what I built over, you know, 25 years, 30 years. So,
Wow.
and I looked at that, and that was a mindset. I mean, because I knew here in Southern California in the 90s, anybody who was in development work, most of us went bankrupt. I mean, the
Hmm.
economy took a dump. We were hit with major projects. We lost funding. We were cross collateralized. Real estate went to hell in a handbasket. And at the time, I had almost 35 partnerships going
Hmm.
that I protected the partnerships and personally went bankrupt as a result of that. And but you know what? Uh, a lot of people I know who went bankrupt never came back.
Yeah.
All right. And the reason they didn't come back is that, you know, life is nothing but choices. And
Mhm.
when you realize you get to make those choices, and my choice was to come back stronger than when I went out. That was my
Yeah.
choice.
Absolutely. And you definitely have. And as a result of it, became stronger.
Yeah. And then
That's
the other one is that, I have a
amazing.
48-year-old son that has some difficulties. He's lost his sight about 2 years ago now.
Hmm.
And I could sit there and hold on. I could sit there and you know not deal with it, but I've set up in a I dealt it with it in as positive a manner as I can possibly deal with.
Hmm.
And my long-term planning has changed my because he has to have assistance for the rest of his life, and
Yeah.
it changes everything. Some people would regret that, some people would be hostile to that, and you know what? That's a choice that we have.
Yeah.
Like you said, everyone has their challenges, everyone has their choice to how they're going to deal with something.
Hmm.
And let me give you an example. I went to a charity one time and bid on a sailboat ride. It's sunset, okay?
Hmm.
So we get down there. I get on the boat. There's two guys on the boat, and one guy takes our coat, and I'm looking at it and said, well, that's a little strange. Or I didn't quite understand what the thing was. So we leave the dock, and as we're going out, I find out the guy's blind. All right. And he understands paramedic pressure, where the wind comes from. It was absolutely amazing.
Wow.
And we were out with him on the boat, and he was the Vietnamese War, Agent Orange, tumors, blindness. All right. And most delightful, understanding, enjoyable human being to be around. And my wife asked him, I said, well, with all the things that have happened to you, why are you so happy? Why are you
Hmm.
so well adjusted? And he says, well, I tried it the other way and it didn't work for me.
Hmm.
All right. I mean, that sums it up. I mean, it's a
Yeah,
choice that we
absolutely.
make in our lives to be happy, not happy, successful, not successful. So that's the other thing that I learned as a life lesson, is that those are your choices, nobody else's.
Wow. Thank you, Dale. You've always said that business was your passion, even from a young age, that you knew you were destined to go straight into creating wealth and professional growth. And I wanted to find out how you began to take the role of an entrepreneur. So, to start off, what inventions or companies have you been the founder of,
Well,
or at
that's
least help facilitate?
that's a long list. How far back
Yeah.
do you want me to go?
Let's just go from around my age, like when you first started into your adulthood life.
Okay, so you're 23?
21, 21.
Oh, 21. Okay. So at 21, um, I got married, just came right out of school,
Hmm.
and I worked for a company called Phillips, and I was a infield technician because my background came from a technology. I went to DeVry Institute of Technology, and
Okay.
the reason I did that was I knew technology would be continually changing, and I've always felt that change creates opportunity,
Hmm.
and that it would not be an industry that would ever go away because technology will always evolve. And I also knew that if I had a technical background and I could sell technology with some management, I could work anywhere in the country that I wanted to work with. I had a skill level that I could go anywhere I wanted to go with.
Hmm.
So I followed that path. Um, then when I was doing that, I also started my own alarm company, and where I would sell something during the week, I'd install it on the weekend. And the reason I did that was that I recognized that was recurring revenue that I got paid on that installation every month for something
Hmm.
for it. So at 21, 22, I was well aware of recurring revenue and the value that recurring revenue will bring to somebody. It's the best way to ever create cash flow and money is to have reoccurring.
Hmm.
So pretty much every business I've ever owned, I had a recurring revenue aspect set to it. So uh, I then read an article in the Wall Street Journal that Westinghouse was selling franchisees for residential alarm systems. So I was selling alarms, somewhat knew about it. I knew that, and this is early 70s, 70, 73, 74, 72, actually,
Okay.
72. And so I contacted them. They said they had already sold all three franchises. in Chicago, because at that time I had moved to Chicago because I
Okay.
school at DeVry. And I contacted the guy who bought all three franchise locations and sat down with him to see what he was doing, where he was doing. And I found out he had a really difficult time on the installation side and the technology side. He could sell it, but couldn't get it installed.
Okay.
So I cut a deal with him, give me 10% of your company and I'll come in and solve that problem. So we got into negotiations right before we consummated the deal. He called me and said, Dale, I'm suing Westinghouse for default on the franchise. They're buying my company back so that we don't go to suit. So they bought it back. I jumped on an airplane, flew to Pittsburgh to meet with the Westinghouse people to say, hey, here's the involvement I had. You got a real problem there. You need to hire me as the operations manager of the company you now purchased. They said, yeah, absolutely. So they hired me. I went back and became an employee of Westinghouse, and and then made the decision that okay, operationally I was able to get things turned around, brought some right people in, and I realized that selling I would make more money than I would in operations. So I went into sales. In the
Okay.
first year, in the 9 months, I was the top salesperson in the country selling residential alarm systems. Um, I then came back and I felt that a lot of things that Westinghouse was doing were wrong in the business, that they didn't really understand the business. So I had an opportunity to, because I was convinced well, they'd go out of business because they just did not have a good business model.
Mhm.
So I got offered a regional manager for Westinghouse in New York. So I said, well, let me go build my resume. I could go, if Westinghouse goes out of business, I can be a sales guy in Chicago where the company failed, or I could be a regional sales manager, a general manager for Westinghouse in the New York area. So I flew out there, took their number one worst office of the 17 that they owned.
Mhm.
And at the end of a 12-month period, I was their number one office. And then the companies, the franchisees that refused to sell back to them, they turned them into distributorships. And there was a distributorship out in California that was struggling. I got a call from them saying, hey, would you come out? Would you like to, work for us? We'll give you an opportunity. And at that time, I'm 24 years old, 20, just turned 23, 24. And, I didn't know a lot that time. So I went out there and I cut a deal for, well, give me 10% of the company and I'll come out and turn your sales around. Well, I went out there for 10% of the company and started off as a sales manager, went to a regional sales manager, went to the CEO of that company in a 7 or 8 year period. And when I went to join that company, they had 3 months cash flow left. And then if they couldn't get it turned around 3 months, the cash flow would go out. I'd be in California without a job. And I said, well, that's okay. And,
Yeah.
but in 7 months, turned it around. And then 5 years later, well, no, 4 years later, I bought out the I bought out the Westinghouse subsidiary,
Mhm.
Westinghouse Security. I bought them out, and I cut a deal where they paid me $2 million to take over the company. And
Wow.
because at that time, I was producing, I was consuming 55% of their entire product output
Mhm.
that they were selling across the country to their own companies and to distributors. And we went back when myself and three other partners, the guys who own the other 90%, uh, negotiated and purchased Westinghouse subsidiary. And that's when we named the company West Tech. And
Okay.
then in 1981, sold West Tech for $30 million, 34 years old. And I walked out with $3 million in cash.
She claims she can't find it.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then,
And then
you know, you know, life lesson learned at that period of time. So 34 years old, I had the airplane. I made some good money while I was working there.
yeah.
And spent the worst 8 months of my life. And here's what I learned. is that, and I, you have to understand, I put myself to sleep every night saying I want $1 million in cash.
Mhm.
And sold the company, didn't want to work for the people who bought it. Went to the drive-up window, deposited in my checking account, and went home. And in 8 months, I went to bartending school. Oh, that's where I found my first limo driver, by the way.
Oh, really? At bartending school?
Yeah. Uh, and 8 months of not being very happy, and that's where I learned that it's not obtaining the goal where happiness comes from; it's the journey to the goal. And I learned that the closer you get to your goal, you got to move that goal out further, right? And so as I come to my goals, I realize, okay, well, just move that goal out further.
Mhm.
And that's another life lesson that I've learned that's absolutely critical to one's happiness and success. So, and then I took my investment, I went into the development business in 82, was in that until 1991, until I lost everything that I owned. And I was making,
Mhm.
$1.5 million, $2 million a year.
Yeah. Wow.
Uh, and but living like a rock star, having a great
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. I would
Right?
expect nothing less.
Yeah. And when I went bankrupt, I lost everything. A friend came to me and said, "Hey, Dale, I got a company, small company, and I invested in it. It looks like I'm going to lose my money. Will you go in there and take a look at it?" So I went and looked at it, and they were selling PBXs, phone systems to businesses.
Okay.
So I looked at it. I said, "Okay, give me 40% of the company. I'm 40 some years old. I'm a lot smarter. Give me
Yeah.
40% of the company. I'll turn it around." That was 92. And then in 1999, we sold that company for $18 million.
Wow.
So, and I made good money all in between, so I sold it for 18 million, but I owned 40% of it. I
Yeah.
didn't own 10% of the 30. So the 40% of 18 million was more money.
Yeah.
So, when I sold that company, I started the company I'm in right now, which is what, 21 years ago, called
Mhm.
TAG Technology Assurance Group. It's an association that started out teaching people how to sell phone systems. They evolved into how to sell IT. And my success there has been, we made a major impact in the industry through our sales processes, our management processes, through the processes of how you deal with customers and so forth. And I have taught our membership to sell reoccurring revenue streams.
Mhm.
And every time they do, I get a small piece of that. So I got 138 companies that are creating reoccurring revenue that when they do that, I get a piece of that. And
Wow.
I've been doing that for 21 years.
Wow, Dale. That's awesome. So
And
quite a
then in
quite a
addition to that,
journey.
yeah, I've sat on a lot of different boards too. So,
Mhm.
I sat on a board, they give me a stock. I help them in certain areas. We've sold two of those companies now. And between those two companies, I picked up another couple of $1 million.
Wow.
So
That's amazing. So you said that you went to DeVry University. Was that for your bachelor's degree?
no, that was my technical degree.
As your technical. Okay, so
Yeah,
how many degrees do you possess?
DeVry Institute of Technology.
Okay, DeVry. And do you have any other degrees from any other places? I know you said you did a stint
Yeah, I
at
did the
Harvard,
small
correct?
company management program at Harvard University when I was 31.
Okay.
So high
And
school
you
DeVry, and then a small company management program at Harvard.
okay.
But the other thing, I'm an avid reader.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I have another interview for this class due at the end of the um, end of the semester, and my topic is about books, and so I
Uh,
wanted to interview Ryan as well as you for
yeah.
that one. Um, but what would you say is the most important thing you learned from your time in college specifically?
Well, it was a technical school. I worked full time, 8 hours a day, and went to school 7 hours a day.
Okay.
And then
Wow.
I had started the alarm company on the weekends during that period. All right. So the most important thing I learned was all school does is give you the avenues of where to go find the information so you can learn on your own and teach
Mhm.
yourself and then have experience. I
Wow.
chose not to go to college, only because the group that when I looked at what the sophomoric approach to everything, and I was just more mature than
Yeah.
having to go someplace and have someone babysit me while I matured out. I mean, I knew what I wanted, I knew where I was going to go. I knew, um, I knew I didn't need a college education to be successful, what I wanted to do in my life. That's all. And I'm not saying that college is not important, okay?
Yeah.
But it has different reasons for different people.
Mhm.
When I lectured at San Diego State, I'd look at the regular classes, and most of those kids were there because they had nothing else to do. All right.
Yeah.
And then I would lecture at the entrepreneurial class, and the 80-20 rule applied there.
Mhm.
That 20% of those people in there, you could tell it. And when I lectured at the master's program of guys getting their master's degree that wanted to be entrepreneurial, I mean, as I lectured, I could tell who was never make it in a million years and who would.
Yeah. Okay. Um, what's one aspect that you would say is something you could teach me about the business world and how to be successful?
Yeah, treat everybody as they're special. Always respect your customer. First of all, create an environment that your employees have the abilities to succeed. The environment of where someone works is absolutely critical.
Hmm.
All right. And then, all right, treat the customer that every time that you have that relationship, they feel special because they are, and respect that customer and provide the services that they've purchased, and don't meet their expectations, exceed their
Exceed them.
expectations, and
Okay.
you will be a successful company.
Okay. So just making sure to take special care of your customers.
Well, create the environment so your employees, because your business is only your business is your employees. If you
Yeah.
got bad employees or you got unmotivated employees, you got an unmotivated company.
Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
So that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. So lately, Dale, you and I have been working on developing my public speaking skills and finding topics that will allow me to go out and get paid to speak and or teach people how to do something. So I was curious what other information you might be able to share that may contribute to my success later on down the road. So for starters, what advice do you have for public speaking specifically?
Yeah. Anybody who's going to public speak, I've always recommended, even my salespeople, to go to Toastmasters.
Okay.
Great, great foundation, great process. And then, you know, I mean, here, the other thing is that, you know, you are who you perceive yourself to be. So
Hmm.
I teach psycho-cybernetics. Picture yourself of what you want to be and see yourself speaking, then also watch as many keynotes, as many speakers as possible, and
Hmm.
develop your own style and be
Okay.
different. Talk from the heart, talk with passion, all right, and talk from an understanding point. Hagen, I got 11 o'clock I got to get into. I didn't know this was going to go this long. It's
Okay.
my problem, and I cannot. Can we come back to this or not?
Yeah, I can. What we can do is we can come back and then I can just edit the video back
Okay,
together so that
perfect.
it's one fluid thing. So Dale, thank you so much. Just let me know when you're available and we can finish the last kind of quarter of it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank
All
you,
right,
Dale.
great, appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. We got that going. I got a transcript going. So right where we left off, you had just given me one piece of advice for public speaking, and so if you just want to go from there, what's one piece of advice you can give me for public speaking?
Yeah, when you know your subject extremely well, be passionate about what you're speaking about, engage your audience. Good public speakers have that ability that everybody in the audience thinks they're talking to them. And you do that by trying to have eye contact with as many as possible
Mhm.
and having the ability to bring energy to the subject and bring passion to the subject.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I wanted to know when you gave your first speech in front of a group of people. Do you remember
Wow.
that?
Let me think. Wow. I was a Peoria Journal-Star paper boy,
Okay.
and I was in the finalists to win the trip to Scotland. And, I lived about 60 miles from Peoria. And so we drove down there, and, I think I was 11 or 12. And I had to stand up and give a presentation of why I should be picked to go to Scotland.
Uh-huh.
And so I remember it, clearly, because I didn't win. And the guy that did win, I learned from him. He had a better personality. He was more outgoing. He was more aggressive. Uh, and I put that together, and I learned a lot from that. So as a salesperson,
Mm-hmm.
I'm always presenting to somebody. My audience is either 1-on-1 or 2-to-1.
Yeah.
So as a salesperson, from day one, to me that was public speaking, because I was presenting an idea or a concept for them to buy from me.
Yeah.
And my majority of my speaking started 21 years ago when I started TAG.
Okay.
I started teaching people how to be a better business. But
Interesting.
I've never been afraid to speak in front of anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I used to do my training class would be a day and a half, 8 hours and 4 hours. And I gave that with no PowerPoint whatsoever,
Mm-hmm.
no notes whatsoever,
Just right off the top.
right off the top.
Yeah.
And I'm really good at doing that because I've done
Yeah.
it so much, is that, I'll walk into a situation and I'll feel the crowd, I'll feel what they're looking for, and I'll present something to them.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't want to say it's natural. Um, it's
Comfortable.
yeah, it's comfortable. I'm comfortable in front of people,
Yeah.
because as a salesman, you're really an actor anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And as a public speaker, you are an actor.
Yeah.
And that's where psycho-cybernetics really comes into play too, Hagen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And along the lines with that, one of the biggest things is how I've looked at your life since knowing you and see how big mentoring is for you. And that's what leads me into my next question, which is who who do you feel was your most impactful mentor?
Yeah.
If you're able to answer that.
Well, yeah, I can. And I don't believe he knew he was a mentor, because as a young person,
Mm-hmm.
I really observed people. One was, I'm going to start with my dad. I
Mm-hmm.
watched my dad and how he carried himself and what his values were
Mm-hmm.
and what his thoughts were. Very, very big influence on me. And the other one was when I was 14. I I worked in a gas station every Sunday, so I didn't have to go to church.
Yeah.
And the owner of that gas station, I learned a lot from him from a business standpoint, from a
Mm.
mentoring standpoint. And the one big lesson that I learned from him was I had to tell him that his brother was working there and his brother was stealing from him.
Yeah.
And he said, Dale, I know that. He said, but my thought process, if he's doing that to me as his brother, he must really need it. And that's that pretty much has stuck with me most of my life. So when someone does take from me or anything else, my attitude is, well, you know what? If they're doing that, they must really need it. And I let it go.
Wow.
So, there's little things in your life that really make a difference. And, I'm very fortunate. I know those things that have made a difference in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. That is amazing. Um, and that leads me to my final question that we have scripted. Why do you value mentoring others so much, Dale?
Oh, it's real easy. I get more out of mentoring than I give. And it's one of those things where I learn more from the people that I'm mentoring than I believe that I give to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that it's something where I look at the people in my life who have mentored me, and I know what I've gotten from that, and I feel an obligation that you need to do that. My dad told me one thing when I was growing up. He said, if you can change one person's life for the positive, you're a successful human being. And he said, just think of every human being on the face of the earth changed one person's life positively, we'd have a different world. We'd have a better world. Does that make
Wow.
sense?
Yeah, perfect sense.
Okay.
Well, Dale, all of this has just been so amazing. And I feel like every time you and me get a chance to talk, I get to learn so much more about you, which I love. And so the final question is, what's something that you wish to accomplish before you die? What's something that you look forward to accomplishing before you are done here on earth?
I mean, here I've had a very successful life. All right. I get up every day and I always tell myself, what are you grateful for today? I don't know anybody who lives better than me. I
Mhm.
mean that sincerely. And it has nothing to do with money, by the way.
Yeah.
It has to do with self-fulfillment, self-image. I never had a job. I mean, everything I do is a sort of it's my lifestyle.
Hmm.
And I've been very, very fortunate that I've pretty much been able to do pretty much anything that I wanted to do.
Hmm.
Uh, I I want to be able to continue what I'm doing.
Hmm.
But my ultimate goal is that when I do pass, I just want to be able to take care of Bernie.
Hmm.
I mean that's a burning, you know, desire that when I'm gone, she's taken care of. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, Dale, thank you so much for this. This is gonna be a great paper that my classmates are gonna learn a ton from. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Okay. Well, I know you'll do a good job